In the high desert of southeastern Oregon, where ancient lava flows carved impossible landscapes and silent stretches for miles, something waits in the rocks. Something that's been waiting for 7 years. This is the story of Ethan Myers, a 27-year-old filmmaker who walked into one of America's most unforgiving wildernesses and never walked out. But this isn't just another missing hiker story. Because years later, what two college students found wedged between basalt cliffs changed everything we thought we knew about what happened in those final moments. This is a story about isolation, obsession, and the terrifying possibility that sometimes the wilderness isn't what kills you. To understand what happened in the Owyhee Canyonlands in the summer of 2016, you first need to understand Ethan Myers. Born in Portland, raised in the shadow of Mount Hood, Ethan was what you might call a weekend warrior. But that label wouldn't do him justice. By his mid-20s, he'd summit Mount Rainier 3 times, completed sections of the Pacific Crest Trail, and earned a reputation in local hiking forums as someone who did his homework. We're talking about a guy who would spend weeks researching weather patterns, studying topographical maps with a magnifying glass, and testing gear in his backyard until his neighbors complained. His sister, Sarah Myers, described him as borderline paranoid when it came to preparation. Ethan would pack backup batteries for his backup batteries, she told investigators. He had contingency plans for his contingency plans. That's why when he didn't come back, we knew something was seriously wrong. In early 2016, Ethan had become obsessed with what he called authentic wilderness storytelling. He was tired of the glossy, sponsored content flooding social media, hikers posing with energy drinks against scenic backdrops, influencers who'd never spent a night actually alone in the backcountry. He wanted to create something real, something raw. His plan was simple. Document a solo trek through some of the most remote terrain in the Pacific Northwest, using minimal equipment and maximum authenticity. No production crew, no safety net, just him, his camera, and the wilderness. The Owyhee Canyonlands seemed perfect for this vision. Located in the high desert of southeastern Oregon, it's a landscape that looks like Mars, towering red rock formations, hidden slot canyons, and stretches where you can walk for days without seeing another human being. It's also dangerous. The terrain is unpredictable. Cell service is non-existent, and the weather can shift from scorching heat to hypothermic cold within hours. But that danger was exactly what Ethan was looking for. In the weeks leading up to his departure, Ethan became even more meticulous than usual. He studied satellite imagery, cross-referenced weather reports going back 5 years, and even contacted a local Paiute tribal elder to ask about traditional travel routes through the area. He bought a new drone, a high-end model with extended battery life and weatherproofing. He tested it obsessively, flying it in his neighborhood until the FAA nearly cited him for unauthorized urban flights. On July 12, 2016, he posted what would be his final social media update. A photo of his packed gear laid out on his apartment floor. The caption read, 3 days, 0 contact, total immersion. This is what authentic storytelling looks like. Hashtag Owyhee or nothing. The photo showed everything. His ultralight tent, water purification tablets, emergency beacon, which investigators would later note he never activated, first aid kit, 2 cameras, the drone, and enough food for 5 days because Ethan always packed extra. On July 15, 2016, at 3:47 p.m., Ethan sent his last text message from a gas station in the tiny town of Jordan Valley, Oregon, population 181. The message, sent to his sister Sarah, was characteristically detailed. Final supply stop. Weather looks perfect. Route plotted. Phone goes in airplane mode now. Back Sunday evening latest. If I'm not back by Tuesday morning, call SNR. GPS coordinates in my desk drawer. Love you. The gas station's security camera captured him filling up his Subaru Outback, checking his map one final time, and driving east toward the canyon access road. The timestamp read 4:23 p.m. That was the last confirmed sighting of Ethan Myers alive. Sunday evening came and went. No Ethan. Tuesday morning arrived, and Sarah made the call to search and rescue. But here's where the story gets its first strange twist. The Jackson County Search and Rescue Coordinator, a 20-year veteran named Tom Bradley, later admitted that something felt off from the very beginning. Most missing hiker cases, you've got some warning signs, Bradley explained to reporters years later. Bad weather, equipment failure, a medical emergency. But Ethan's case? Perfect conditions, experienced hiker, top-tier gear. It didn't make sense. The initial search lasted 5 days and involved 23 personnel, including specialized canyon rescue teams and aerial units. They followed Ethan's planned route exactly, found his vehicle parked at the designated trailhead, and began systematic grid searches of the surrounding area. What they found was nothing. No tent, no backpack, no scattered gear from a fall, no emergency signals from his beacon. It was as if Ethan had simply evaporated somewhere between mile marker 12 and mile marker 15 of his planned route. The search expanded. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters with thermal imaging swept the canyons. Local volunteers organized their own search parties. A $10,000 reward was posted. Still nothing. Without evidence, theories multiplied. Some suggested Ethan had fallen into one of the area's hidden slot canyons, narrow fissures in the rock that could swallow a person completely. Others wondered if he'd suffered a medical emergency and managed to crawl somewhere the searchers couldn't find. The more conspiracy-minded locals whispered about the area's history. The Owyhee Canyonlands had seen its share of unexplained disappearances over the decades. There were stories, probably just stories, about hermits living in the deeper canyons, people who'd gone off the grid decades ago and didn't take kindly to visitors. But without evidence, stories are just stories. After 2 weeks, the active search was called off. Ethan Myers was officially listed as a missing person, and his case file was tucked away in a cabinet in the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, where it would sit untouched for nearly 7 years. Ethan's family never stopped looking. Sarah organized annual search expeditions, hiring private investigators and following up on every supposed sighting or tip. His parents, both in their 60s, spent their retirement savings on search efforts that yielded nothing but false hope and emotional exhaustion. "We just wanted to bring him home," his mother, Linda Myers, said in a 2019 interview. "We didn't need answers. We just needed him." But the desert kept its secrets. March 23, 2023. 2 geology students from Boise State University, Marcus Chen and Riley Davidson, were conducting field research in a section of the Owyhee Canyonlands roughly 8 miles from where Ethan had originally planned to hike. They weren't looking for anything dramatic, just mapping fault lines for a senior thesis project, taking rock samples, and earning course credit in one of the most geologically interesting regions in North America. The weather had been unusually wet that spring, and recent rainfall had washed away years of accumulated sediment and debris in the canyon system. Ancient rock formations were exposed, and new geological features had become visible. Around 2 p.m., while following a particularly interesting basalt formation, Chun spotted what appeared to be a narrow passage between 2 massive rock slabs. It was the kind of geological feature that might have been invisible just weeks earlier, hidden under brush and loose rock. It looked like the rocks had just opened up, Chun would later tell investigators. Like someone had taken a giant knife and sliced between them. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, but it descended deep into the rock formation. Using headlamps and rope, the 2 students rappelled about 20 feet down into the crevice. That's when Davidson saw the glint of metal. Wedged tightly between the rock walls, about 15 feet down and partially buried under years of debris, was a drone. Not just any drone, a high-end model that clearly hadn't been there recently. The casing was battered, the rotors were damaged, but it was remarkably intact. More importantly, there was a small sticker on the side, E. Myers / 2016. Chun and Davidson immediately understood the significance. Everyone in the outdoor community knew about Ethan Myers. His disappearance had become something of a local legend, a cautionary tale told around campfires and hiking forums. They carefully extracted the drone and contacted park rangers, who immediately called the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Within hours, the device was in the hands of forensics experts. The drone was a DJI Phantom 4, a model known for its durability and storage capacity. Despite 7 years of exposure to the elements, the internal SD card was intact and readable. Detective Maria Santos, who had recently been assigned to cold cases, supervised the data recovery process. What they found on that card would reopen one of Oregon's most puzzling missing persons cases and reveal something far more sinister than anyone had imagined. The card contained 47 individual video files, spanning 3 days in July 2016. The early footage was exactly what you'd expect from Ethan's project. Sweeping landscape shots, time-lapse sequences of him setting up camp, narrated segments where he discussed the spiritual connection between human and wilderness. But it was the final file, timestamp 5:43 a.m., July 18, 2016, that changed everything. The last video file begins like all the others. The drone lifts off from a rocky outcrop, its camera capturing the sunrise, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and red. Below, Ethan is visible setting up what appears to be a final time-lapse shot of the sunrise. He's alone, or appears to be. The footage shows him moving efficiently through his morning routine, packing his sleeping bag, checking his map, preparing for what should have been his hike back to civilization. At the 3-minute, 17-second mark, Ethan looks up at the drone and waves. He's smiling, clearly pleased with the footage he's been capturing. He gives a thumbs up to the camera and turns back to his gear. That's when something changes. At 3:43, Ethan stops moving. He's standing near the edge of the outcrop, but his posture shifts. His head turns sharply to the right, toward something off camera. His body language suggests surprise, but not alarm. More like someone who's encountered an unexpected but not necessarily threatening presence. The drone, still hovering and recording, begins to drift slightly in the wind. Its automated stabilization system works to keep the camera focused on Ethan, but the perspective shifts just enough to reveal more of the surrounding area. That's when viewers can see what Ethan is looking at. From behind a large boulder, roughly 30 feet from Ethan's position, a figure emerges. The resolution isn't perfect, it's early morning, the light is challenging, and the drone is perhaps 50 feet above the scene, but the details are clear enough to be disturbing. The figure is human, definitely male, wearing what appears to be a beige or tan canvas jacket and carrying what looks like a hiking pole or walking stick. He's moving deliberately but not aggressively toward Ethan. What's most unsettling is the casual nature of the approach. This isn't someone stumbling upon Ethan by accident. The movement is purposeful, calculated. At 4:12, the figure reaches Ethan. There's no apparent conversation that the drone's microphone picks up, just wind and the distant sound of the rotors. The figure places one hand on Ethan's shoulder in what could be interpreted as a friendly gesture. Ethan doesn't pull away, but his body language suggests confusion. He turns toward the camera, toward the drone, and his expression is clearly visible for just a moment. It's not fear exactly. It's more like bewilderment. Then, at 4:23, both figures move out of the frame. The drone, operating on its automated follow-me mode, attempts to track Ethan's GPS signal. But something goes wrong with the programming. Instead of following, it begins to drift erratically. For the next 6 minutes and 18 seconds, the drone captures increasingly chaotic footage as it drifts further from its intended position. The automated systems struggle to maintain altitude and direction. Occasionally, the camera catches glimpses of the rock formations below, but Ethan and the mysterious figure are nowhere to be seen. At 10:41, the drone clips the edge of a rock formation and tumbles into the crevice, where it would remain hidden for nearly 7 years. The final seconds of footage show spinning images of rock and sky before the feed cuts to black. Forensic audio specialists enhanced the sound from the crucial 4-minute window when both figures were visible. While no clear conversation could be extracted, they did identify what sounds like Ethan saying, "I'm not," before the audio becomes unintelligible. They also detected what might be a second voice, deeper and more difficult to distinguish, but no clear words could be isolated. Detective Santos knew she was looking at potential evidence in a homicide case. The footage strongly suggested that Ethan hadn't died alone, and the mysterious figure's behavior raised numerous red flags. The investigation began with the clothing. The beige canvas jacket visible in the footage was distinctive enough to potentially trace. Canvas jackets of that style and color were popular among hunters and outdoorsmen in the region, but they weren't common enough to be untraceable. Working with state databases and local outfitters, investigators compiled a list of individuals who had purchased similar jackets in the years leading up to 2016. The list included hunters, guides, and outdoor enthusiasts from across the Pacific Northwest. One name stood out: Caleb Rourke. Rourke was a 54-year-old former hunting guide who had operated in the Oahe region for over 2 decades. He'd been investigated in connection with 2 previous disappearances, hikers who had vanished in similar terrain in 2009 and 2011, but there had never been enough evidence to bring charges. Caleb Rourke was what locals called a canyon rat, someone who knew the backcountry better than most people know their own neighborhoods. He'd grown up in the area, learned to hunt and track from his grandfather, and had spent most of his adult life guiding wealthy clients on hunting trips through some of Oregon's most remote terrain. But Rourke had a darker side. He'd been cited multiple times for hunting violations, had lost his guide license in 2014 following complaints about his behavior toward clients, and had been involved in several altercations with other outdoorsmen over territorial disputes in the canyon system. More troubling were the reports from former clients who described Rourke as obsessed with privacy and paranoid about other people in his territory. Several mentioned that he seemed to take the presence of unauthorized hikers as a personal affront. In September 2009, Marcus Webb, a 31-year-old software engineer from Seattle, had disappeared while backpacking alone in the Oahe Canyonlands. His car was found at a trailhead roughly 12 miles from where Ethan would later vanish. 2 years later, Jennifer Santos, no relation to Detective Santos, a 29-year-old photographer from Portland, went missing while attempting to document wildflower blooms in the same general area. In both cases, search and rescue efforts had found no trace of the missing individuals. In both cases, Caleb Rourke had been interviewed as someone who might have seen them in the area. In both cases, he claimed to have no knowledge of their whereabouts. When investigators obtained a search warrant for Rourke's property in late 2023, they discovered something that made the hair on the back of Detective Santos's neck stand up. In a closet in Rourke's cabin, they found a beige canvas jacket that appeared to match the one visible in Ethan's drone footage. The jacket showed signs of wear consistent with backcountry use, and forensic analysis revealed the presence of human blood on the interior fabric. DNA testing would later confirm that the blood belonged to Ethan Myers. But there was a problem. Caleb Rourke had died in a logging accident in November 2019, more than 3 years before the drone was discovered. He'd been crushed by a falling tree while working a timber operation outside of Burns, Oregon. Without a living suspect, and without Ethan's body, prosecutors couldn't bring murder charges. The case was officially classified as a strong suspicion of homicide, but it would never go to trial. For Ethan's family, the discovery of the drone footage brought both relief and renewed anguish. Finally, they had some answers about what had happened to their son and brother. But those answers led to even more painful questions. Knowing that someone hurt Ethan, that his death wasn't just a hiking accident, it changes everything, Sarah Myers told reporters. But we still don't know where he is. We still can't bring him home. The connection between Caleb Rourke and multiple disappearances in the Owyhee Canyonlands has prompted investigators to take a fresh look at other cold cases in the region. Over the past 3 decades, at least 7 people have vanished without a trace in that stretch of high desert. How many of those disappearances might be connected to Rourke? And are there other victims whose cases were never properly investigated? Ethan Myers walked into the wilderness to document authentic human experience in one of America's last truly wild places. What he found instead was a reminder that the most dangerous predators in the wilderness aren't always the ones with 4 legs and sharp teeth. Sometimes the real danger comes from the one species that kills not for food or territory, but for reasons that defy understanding. The Owyhee Canyonlands still keep their secrets. Somewhere in those red rock formations, Ethan Myers is still waiting to come home. And somewhere in the silence between the rocks, the question remains. Was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or did someone make sure he'd never leave?